Welcome to L-Space Archives. I'm Rob, and today I'm going to go through my Dinovember reads. I had planned to do separate videos for each of these, but unfortunately, life took an unexpected sharp right turn for me this month, so I'm going to have to combine these into sort of a single monthly wrap-up review video. First, a quick note about how I normally rate books. There are 5 main categories that I rate novels in: characters, world building or setting if it's set in the real world, plot and or structure, prose on both the technical and artistic side, and finally what I call the ineffable. Basically my personal gut reaction to how much I enjoyed or disliked a book, regardless of its flaws or its merits. We all have those books we know are technically well written, but for reasons we can't explain, we just don't connect with them. Or more often, those books that we know are really bad, that fail on every level, but we inexplicably love them anyway. Those guilty pleasures, those books that we'll never get rid of. Maybe it's childhood nostalgia, or maybe it just reminds us of that special someone. Anyway, each of those 5 categories is broken down into subcategories, giving an average rating for each overall category, and finally an overall average for the book as a whole. Yes, it involves spreadsheets, but don't worry, I'm not going to make you go through any of that torture. But the reason I do it this way is that everyone gravitates towards different things in a story. Some people need well-developed characters, but are okay with a so-so plot. Others love great world building, but are okay with less rounded characters, and so on and so on. Now, you can ignore everything I just said, because today I'm just going to give a quick overview and rating, because there's a lot to talk about, and more importantly, I'm lazy. So, the first 2 reviews are for Dinosaur Beach by Keith Laumer and Dinosaur Beach by Keith Laumer. Because it's Dinovember, let's start off with Dinosaur Beach. Obviously, when you hear the words Dinosaur Beach, there's one image that I'm sure comes into all of our heads. So how does this book, featuring a couple running away from a dinosaur on a beach, rate on the Dino Action scale? Well, these almost but not quite 2 pages that make up chapter 7 are all of the dino action you get in this book. Mind you, they are almost but not quite 2 pages of very well written, awesome dinosaur action. It's exciting, it's tense. If this entire book were only almost but not quite 2 pages long, this would be a 5-star dinosaur novel. But considering it's 150 pages long, I can only in good conscience give it 1 star on the Dinovember scale. If you come to this book solely for the sake of dinosaurs, you will be disappointed. So my first Dinovember book was kind of a failure. But what about the non-dinosaur book, Dinosaur Beach by Keith Laumer? Well, this book was fun, mostly. I'm going to try not to be biased on this, but full disclosure, I am a Keith Laumer fan. Laumer is another writer whose entire bibliography I've collected, but not because he's a great writer. It's because of personal nostalgia and fond memories I have in my youth. I grew up reading his James Retief stories in my early teens. They were fun, adventurous, with a bit of satirical wit thrown in. Retief was a Machiavellian galactic diplomat who bucked the bureaucracy and was more likely to resolve diplomatic issues with his wits and his fists than by following protocols. Laumer wrote stories that were just fun. Laumer was good at coming up with a premise, almost like an elevator pitch, that would pique your interest. However, he did have some notable faults, which I will get to. Now, I'm going to try not to spoil the story or the plot or even the initial setup in the first act, because that first act is awesome and should be experienced fresh. Instead, I'm just going to give you the basic premise. So, a time agent named Ravel, or Ravel, as in the opposite of unravel, is sent through time to repair the damage caused by previous time agents. There are multiple generations of time travel organizations, each believing it can fix the mistakes of the previous one. At one point, they decide that any human interaction with the past will mess up the time stream, so they send robot androids called Kargs. This, of course, goes wrong as well. All this meddling has caused the time stream to, well, unravel. Time agent Ravel works for Next Central, the latest group of time agents, again attempting to undo the damage of previous organizations, mainly the robot android Kargs. However, it appears that the android Kargs also seem to be after our protagonist for mysterious reasons. The actual location of Next Central is secret even to the time agents that work for it. The Next Central time agents work out of ancillary hubs. Ravel is stationed out of a hub called Dinosaur Beach, which Next Central placed 65 million years in the past. The Dinosaur Beach station is equipped with a repulsor field, which keeps any actual dinosaurs at bay. It's also important to note that after a time agent returns from a mission, their memories of that time spent on that mission are wiped, and now I'll stop there. So, this novel is only 150 pages long. The first 50 pages are absolutely 5-star, top-tier, balls-to-the-wall storytelling. Pure fun, action, mystery. The last 50 pages are also fantastic, with a great reveal when we get to the final act, a solid ending. That leaves us with the middle section. Sadly, that middle section was a 2-star convoluted slog for me. This is where one of Laumer's notable faults comes in. To be fair, it was a fault shared by many sci-fi writers of this era, and that is that they couldn't write female characters or romantic relationships if their lives depended on it. The love interest is a cardboard cutout. The dialogue is painfully cheesy and repetitive, and creating strong female characters or strong secondary characters in general isn't just about political correctness or social awareness. It's about good writing versus bad writing. It doesn't matter if you're writing a romantic relationship or a buddy cop story. Your secondary characters have to be able to hold their own and challenge your protagonist. It forces the protagonist to elevate their game and provides dynamic tension to those non-action-packed moments in the story. Without that, those moments feel like a slog. The relationships feel unbelievable, the stakes are non-existent, and everything the protagonist accomplishes in those scenes feels unearned. And had Laumer handled the secondary characters and the relationships in the story better, this could have easily been 5 stars across the board. Because of a certain something that happens at the end of the second act, not having a well-rounded secondary character or a believable romantic relationship created a missed opportunity. While that particular scene, which I won't spoil, was an intellectual holy shit moment as far as the plot goes, it could have been so much more. It could have been an emotional gut punch as well. It could have hit the reader on both the intellectual and emotional levels, knocking us on our asses. Without it, it was just a, I'll be damned moment as we go into the final act of the story. Luckily, at only 150 pages, you can blaze through that middle section pretty quick. Despite its flaws, I really do love this book. The first third and the last third of this are amazing. Personally, this would be a 4-star book for me on the old ineffable scale. Realistically, it's probably around a 3.75, but all the marks against it come from that middle section, and the ending is so good that I'm still recommending this regardless of its flaws. The next book I read was Eridahn by Robert F. Young. This was expanded and reworked about 25 years after the fact from a short story Young wrote in the 1950s called When Time Was New. After reading the novel, which I had some issues with, I went back and read the original short story, so I'll be comparing the two. First off, I want to say this cover is awesome. And so the setup. Mr. Carpenter, which is this guy, works for the North American Paleontological Society. His time machine is a tank that can project a hologram to make it look like a Triceratops. FYI, in the short story, it was a mechanical Triceratops, not a projected hologram. He was sent back to the Mesozoic by his boss, Miss Sands, who our protagonist is secretly in love with, and her assistant, Peter, to investigate an anachronistic fossil of a human. When his time machine arrives in the prehistoric past, he discovers two children, a 9-year-old boy named Skip and his 11-year-old sister, Deidre. In the short story, her name is different, but just to keep things less confusing, I'll call her Deidre regardless of which version I'm talking about. It turns out that the two kids are from the planet Mars, which at this time in the distant past had a thriving population. Additionally, these two children are the prince and princess of Greater Mars. Deidre, being the oldest, is destined to become its next monarch. They were kidnapped by Martian terrorists, brought to Earth, where they are being held for ransom. They managed to escape from their kidnappers, which is when Mr. Carpenter happened upon them. And now, Mr. Carpenter has taken it upon himself to help them and to hopefully get them back to Mars. We learn that on Mars, when children become teenagers, they undergo a desentimentalization process to make them more logical. So these kids have never known real love or affection from their parents or from any adult. Mr. Carpenter, being the stand-up guy that he is, feels bad for them and takes them under his wing as the kidnappers attempt to recapture them. Now, in the novel version, the girl, Deidre, initially refuses to speak to Mr. Carpenter because she's the future monarch and he's a mere commoner. Skip does most of the talking for them. In the short story, the girl actually did most of the talking and there wasn't this royalty-commoner gap. I think this was one of the things that the novel actually did better. Having Deidre be aloof, yet also being a kid who wants to secretly join in the fun and the conversations that Carpenter and Skip are having, added an extra layer to her personality. And of course, she does eventually come around. Skip and Deidre, our secondary characters, are definitely the highlights as far as characters go. The villains are cartoonishly bad guys. And our protagonist, well, there are issues, but I'll come back to him. But no, just no. The basic plot and premise are okay, but now it's time to address the real issues. I'll start with the small stuff and work my way up to the big problem I had with this. First, the prose. The writing here is amateurish at best, which is weird because Young had been writing for a long time, but most of that was in the short story format. He wrote only 3 novels in English. An earlier novel was published only in France in the French language, and all of these were released during the last few years of his life. Judging from this, I don't think the long format was Young's forte. There was a lot of padding, repetition, and some scenes stretched out to excruciating lengths. It has an abundance of scenes discussing mundane tasks. Even individual sentences feel like they're stretched out just to get the word count up. The kind of thing you would see a high school student do when they've been assigned to write a 500-word essay. The technical aspects of the short story are actually better written and don't suffer quite so badly. Not great writing in the short story, but serviceable. As for the world building in the novel, even with all those extra words, we usually never get a real sense of immersion in this world. Are there dinosaurs? Oh yes, there are loads of them. Young lists them off like he's writing a laundry list. He rarely describes them or tells us what they're doing, but they are technically there as badly illuminated set dressing. We do have a couple of scenes where we get a little more dino action, but the holographic Triceratops is probably our most prominent feature in the dinosaur realm. So, an okay premise, bad writing, poor world building, oh yeah, the protagonist. After reading this, I went on to read the short story to see if he included these particular problematic scenes in it as well. No, he did not, so at least the short story has that in its favor. In the novel, however, although it may not be blatant, Young's word choice and tone regarding Deidre seem to be trying to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, sexualize and romanticize this 11-year-old girl. And I think the subtlety actually makes it worse and more insidious. This isn't like other novels of the era, which were intentionally trying to shock readers and push boundaries, trying to push people's buttons and test the limits of free speech. This has a vibe that is more like a creepy friend of the family who always wants you to sit on his lap and give you a back rub. There's also an added scene early on where they get recaptured by the kidnappers. Our protagonist bursts in to save the kids just as one of the kidnappers is about to sexually assault 11-year-old Deidre. He's torn her shirt off and ripped her skirt up the middle, and although not explicitly graphic, this scene is at best gratuitous and tone deaf, and at worst it seems to be sexualizing an 11-year-old girl. Now, both versions have the same ending, which could also be seen as problematic, but that isn't my big issue here. So spoiler for the ending if you want to mute or skip. It turns out that Mrs. Sands and her assistant in the future are actually Deidre and Skip. Mr. Carpenter has always had a crush on Miss Sands, and young Deidre developed a crush on Mr. Carpenter, and now the two of them can profess their love and live happily ever after. This does happen in both the novel and the short story. However, in the short story, Carpenter doesn't appear to have any romantic thoughts towards the 11-year-old version of Miss Sands. In the novel version, it seems as though our 30-some-odd-year-old Mr. Carpenter is developing a crush on 11-year-old Deidre. The way he talks about her and to her, again, not blatant, but I definitely got a serious ick vibe from the tone. I really hated this book. I thought the concept could have been good. I liked the way the children were portrayed initially, but between the bad writing and the sort of creepy tone, I almost DNF'd this. My overall rating, 2 stars. On the other end of the spectrum, a story that isn't the least bit subtle about its sexual overtones is the short story Triceratops and Bottoms by Lola Faust. This is straight up erotica with tongue planted firmly in cheek. It doesn't take itself seriously. I can't really fault this or trash talk it because it knows what it's trying to be. Readers who are interested in this type of story know what it's going to be, and Faust delivers on that expectation. I actually have to give her a little credit though, because she does do some setup and world building in the first couple of chapters, which was more than I expected. So the setup is, in the far future, nanites and nanobots ensure that every human need is met simply by thinking about it. No one has to work or strive for anything. This life of perpetual luxury leaves our protagonist, Erin, completely bored. Her main outlet to relieve that boredom is sexual adventures. She has gone to distant worlds, participated in alien orgies, had sex with androids, etc. Now she feels like she's done it all. And then time travel gets invented. However, people are only allowed to travel back to prehistoric times prior to the extinction event that wiped out most life on Earth, because they figure there's less chance of screwing up the timelines that way. Eridahn volunteers to go back. Is there dino action? Oh yeah, there is plenty of hardcore dino action. Eridahn meets a herd of Triceratops, saves the herd from a T-Rex, and one of the Triceratops, who she's named Sarah, shows his appreciation. Is there a happy ending? Oh yeah, there are several happy endings. Just one happy ending after another. Until time runs out and Eridahn has to go back to the future. Oops, sorry, spoiler. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. It is what it is, and I do appreciate that it had at least a bit of setup and world building to start things off. Now, the last book I read was this chunker by Harry Harrison. This is West of Eden, part 1 of a trilogy, but don't let that scare you. This is a complete story in and of itself. It can be read on its own. By the way, this also has some great artwork at the top of each chapter. I'll try to put that up on the screen. So I've read a fair amount of Harrison that I really enjoyed. The Stainless Steel Rat, Build a Galactic Hero, Make Room, Make Room. But I have to say, this is the most amazing thing I've read from him yet. This is hands down a 5-star book across the board. Characters, plot, prose, definitely world building. This is epic. This was obviously a passion project for Harrison. It is ambitious. It was impressive. With that said, this will not be for everyone, but I'll get to that caveat later. First, the premise. This is an alternate history in which the asteroid that caused the dinosaur extinction missed our planet. An intelligent, technologically advanced race of dinosaurs called the Yilani eventually evolved from mosasaurs and dominated the planet. Their main city has spread across the entire continent of Africa. Now they are reaching out to the New World, North America, to establish a city there. Meanwhile, humans never got the biological niche they needed to evolve in Africa. However, a form of humans eventually evolved from New World monkeys in the colder regions of North America. As dinosaurs there reached an evolutionary dead end. These humans, called Tanu, are in the primitive hunter-gatherer stage of development. As the latest glacial period surges, these humans have to start hunting further south. This brings them into contact with the newly arrived hyper-intelligent Yilani, with devastating consequences. That's the setup, the premise. I won't spoil any of the actual story. Like I said, the world building in this is fantastic. Harrison created a unique culture for the Yilani. He created a complex language that's based not just on spoken words, but also body movements, changes in skin color. They have their own societal hierarchy, their own form of religion, and their science and technology didn't evolve from physical sciences like ours did. Their science is completely based on biology and genetic manipulation. Every single tool the Yilani use is an engineered life form. Their cities are grown. Their weapons are bred. The cloaks they wear to stay warm are engineered life forms that maintain a constant body temperature. Even their submarines, which carry them across the oceans, are massive plesiosaurs that have been modified to house the Yilani within. The scope is absolutely stunning. And now, the caveat. If you're looking for an easy read that you can breeze through, this may not be for you. This last section here is the various appendices. Because he's created languages for the Yolani and to some degree for the humans or Tanu as well, it can initially feel a bit confusing. The dinosaurs in this book aren't given the names that we humans gave them. The Yolani gave them their own names. Now, usually you can figure it out through the descriptions and through context, but it can be a lot to get thrown into. Harrison doesn't do any real exposition in this. He throws you into the world and you have to either figure it out or flip back to the appropriate appendix. The same with the names of the continents. Africa isn't called Africa, North America isn't called North America. In addition, the characters do not have names like Bob or Steve. Personally, I like that sort of complete immersion into the world and the challenge of puzzling it all out, but I'm fully aware that it's not everyone's cup of tea. I will say once you finally get your bearings, it does get a lot easier and you'll be able to breeze through this gigantic thing fairly quickly. There weren't any spots in this where I felt like things were bogging down. The pacing is great throughout. The characters are well developed, including the secondary characters. We get to see the world through the eyes of both the humans and the Yolani. This isn't just a good humans versus bad dinosaur story. I will definitely be reading the other 2 books in the series. This is probably going to be one of the best books I've read this year. Like I said, 5 stars across the board. So, that's the books I've read for Dinovember. I do have one more special video for Dinovember that will hopefully go up tomorrow. Thank you all for hanging in there for all of that. My apologies to all of you and to my co-hosts for being so far behind in my dino duties. Hopefully it won't get me banned from the dinosaur games next year. Thank you again, and I'll see you tomorrow with the final dino video.